Given that life expectancies in Jesus' day, 18 years would have been a significant portion of someone's life to be unable to stand up straight. And as we hear this story, I think there's a couple of things that can give us a sense of what is happening with this woman. First off, she does not have like a herniated disc or some other medical issue that is causing her back problem. And we know this because the text tells us that it was a spirit that kept her from being able to stand up straight. Now, it doesn't tell us anything about that spirit, but as the story goes on, Jesus heals her, and then the guy that leads the synagogue gets mad because it's the Sabbath. And you're not supposed to do that, right? So he stands up and says, "We got rules. You're breaking the rules." But he doesn't say it to Jesus. He says it to the rest of the people. He says, really, like, don't come here on this day if you need help. Now, she didn't ask for help. It doesn't tell us why she was there, but he's mad because Jesus broke the rules, and so he's looking at everybody else and saying, don't bother coming on the Sabbath if you need help. Because we got rules, we got laws, we got ways that we do these things. Now, in this particular case, it's the commandments and God's law that this leader of the synagogue is trying to keep the bounds around. But for today, I want to say that this is the system. He's the one who presides over the system of making sure that they are living within God's laws. And because he gets so fired up about that, it suggests to me that the reason the woman has this spirit that has kept her bent over for all these years is because the system has failed her. Jesus heals her. The guy that presides over the system gets mad and starts to try to buckle down on the rules of the system. Somehow the system had failed her for all of these years, and Jesus' healing somehow crosses lines that the system is not happy with. Now, I'm going to say that I understand this just a little bit. I don't want to overstate this, but I spent a few years of my life not being able to stand up super straight, and I had a lot of pain. It was all right in my lower back. It started about 3 months into my working career, and I still remember sitting in all alone in my corporate apartment bedroom in Kansas City in my Nebraska sweatshirt, taking muscle relaxers and painkillers that were doing absolutely no good after I went to the emergency room. Now, eventually that week, the pain went away and I went home for the weekend, but I, kept working and flying for my job, and eventually the pain came back, and then I went to the doctor again, and then it went away, and then it came back, and then it went away, and then it came back, and then it didn't go away. And I went to doctor after doctor after doctor, and physical therapist after physical therapist, and they all asked me the same questions. They said, how far down your legs does the pain radiate? And I would say, well, it doesn't. It's just right in my back. And then they would say, what do you do for a job? And I would say, I sit at a computer all day. And then they'd say, well, there's your problem. You're not supposed to sit like that all day. I finally got to a surgeon who told me I had 2 herniated discs and was ready to schedule my surgery. And luckily, I worked with a guy who had had back surgery and had not slept a night since. And he's like, you are too young to let them start messing with your back. And so I didn't. But my life was really impacted by this. I had a Ford Probe. I loved that car. It was purple. It was called Boysenberry Blue, though, so I just said it was blue. But I couldn't get down into it anymore, so I had to trade it in, and I got an old Ford Ranger pickup truck that I could climb up into. I had, I can't tell you how many pillows in my bed to try to get to a comfortable place. I had a stand-up desk at work before they were popular like they are now. Sometimes I'd lay on the floor in the conference room and work, and people would come in and be surprised there was somebody sprawled out like that. But it was all because I had this pain, and I couldn't get it to go away. And it was really impacting my life. My wife was pregnant. It was about 3 years into it, and I was starting to figure out, how am I going to be a dad? If I can't pick up my kid. Because I couldn't pick up things that were heavy, and all of it was getting really, really hard. I eventually spent a day in the emergency room and in the hospital and couldn't get out of bed to go home when they said, you seem to be fine, because right? It was just pain, and I wasn't imagining this pain, right? But it was just this space of constantly being not able to stand up straight and constantly being in pain. Now, I had a coworker who pointed me in the direction of a book by a doctor. See, they always asked me, how did you injure your back? And the first day that it happened, I was setting my breakfast down on the table. Not really how you hurt your back, generally. And so I didn't have an injury. And I read this book, and it said, if you're reading this book, you probably sleep with a whole bunch of pillows. Yep. And it went through all of these adjustments I had made in my life, and it said, and if you didn't have an injury, because some of you have had back injuries, that's a real thing. I didn't have one. And his theory was that some people deal with their tension in their body deals with the headaches, and some people your tension is in your shoulders, and some it's in your ulcers, and for me, it was right there in my back. And the book said, once you're onto it, it'll move around. 100% happened, right? All of a sudden, my back pain was in other places. And for right away, what I said then was, I had tension and stress, and I didn't deal with it well. And as long as I keep exercising and dealing with my stress well, my back pain is not there most of the time. But reading this story has me rethinking that a little bit. Because the woman's problem was that she had a spirit, right? Not a good spirit, but a spirit that kept her from standing up straight. Now, when I was coming out of high school, I wanted to major in literature. And what does our culture say happens if you major in literature? No job, right? So we have a culture that has expectations and tells you what you should do. And so I remember making this decision. Really want to major in literature. But if I major in engineering, I can get a job. And I can be a cog in the economy. And I can be productive the way we're expected to be productive. And I can pay the bills and do all the things I'm supposed to do. So I went that way. And the problem was, once I get into the working world, you all have probably gathered I have some creative energy. Maybe you didn't, I don't know. When I was a kid, I loved to draw and write, and I always wanted to be an artist. And that job didn't need that. And so for like a decade, while all of this pain was getting that way, a whole part of me was not being exercised. And so I can now look back and say, like, I had this spirit that came from a culture that sets up certain expectations that were at odds with the way God created me to be in the world. And that is what had me bent over and unable to stand up straight. And now I'm a pastor. It wouldn't have to be this job, right? But I get to do all those things now. And so there's a fuller expression of who I am because I have been freed from that particular spirit. Now, I don't want to overstate this, I said, because I chose that. I had a choice, major in this or listen to the cultural story. Now, when I was 18, I didn't understand that cultural story in the way I do now. But this week, some of you know we have a congregational Facebook group. And if you're in Facebook and not on that, let me know and we can get you connected to it. But I posted a question and said, what systems, right? Because it was our cultural system that got me there. What systems have burdened you? And there was a variety of answers. Some of them were like the bureaucracy of government. And the bureaucracy of government can 100% feel like a burden sometimes. It took us one time 4 trips and 8 hours to get 2 driver's license and 2 license plates. Extremely frustrating. Sometimes, though, those bureaucratic things are more than frustrating. If you don't have ID because you're homeless and you're trying to get a driver's license, but your birth certificate is from a different place and you don't have all of the things you need to get a birth certificate, it's not frustrating, right? It gets in the way of you living because the bureaucracy can be that way. But it's not just government. Our medical systems and all kinds of other things. When I went to the emergency room that time, the first time that I had that back pain, I got a huge bill because even though the hospital was in network, the doctors weren't. How am I supposed to know that? I just went to the emergency room and it was on the list. Like, you can go there. Your insurance covers it. Now, I got paid well, so that wasn't a problem. But how often do people enter into our medical system thinking they are getting care that is going to be paid for and then get a bill that they can't afford? That then is not just frustrating, right? The system is impinging on your life. Other people reflected on technology and things like that, and technology is part of our systems. Sometimes it's frustrating because you can't get your phone to do what you want it to do. But other times there's a cost because you have to pay for upgrades and things you didn't plan on paying for. Now, in all of that, I will point out that systems get frustrating like that because systems do not have a heart. They do not have compassion. The psalm we just read talked about God's steadfast love and compassion and mercy. Systems don't have any of that because systems are not people. When a system seems like it has that, it's because someone in that system has expressed mercy and compassion and had a heart. The problem is, though, sometimes the system is just overwhelming. Have you ever encountered a system where you're just trying to get something done and the person just says, I can't do anything. My hands are tied. Because the system says I can't. Sometimes it's literally the computer system. Sometimes they just don't have the power or the authority or feel like they can do anything to change. Now I say all of that in the midst of myself always having choices. I had choices of which college to go to. I had choice whether or not I wanted to major. I've had choices in every job that I have switched. But sometimes the systems aren't the systems we have built, but the systems that we don't always see. And these are much more challenging because these are the ones that aren't managed by people. So can we all agree that women don't get paid equally as men in our culture? Yes, okay. Is there a meeting every year of all the CEOs and the bishops of the churches and all the small business owners where they all gather together and decide how much less we're going to pay women? No, nobody decides these things. Is it sometimes a woman that pays a woman less than the same a man would get paid in the same place? Yes. Does she consciously do that to say, I'm not going to pay her as much? Sometimes maybe, but mostly I would bet not, right? Because this is systematic. It is built into our system that we value women's contributions less than men. It's in the way we talk about it, right? Like I could say when we had little kids, I can say she stayed home. I could say she was a stay-at-home mom. I could say she didn't work. If she's a stay-at-home mom, was she working? She was, right? But how we speak about it's all systematic. And that is so much harder to deal with because it has huge impacts on people's life, on their livelihood, on their ability to thrive, on their ability to live into the people that God created them to be. I chose the spirit that kept me from standing up straight, but not everybody gets to choose the spirit, right? You think about the legacy of slavery. For several hundred years, we managed and had a system that was very intentional at creating slaves and breaking families apart. The intentionality of that system is gone, but the system of racism is still very much with us. And it does not have to be managed, and it does not have to be intentional, and we all participated in ways that we don't even understand all of the time. That doesn't mean it's not there. And so that system is there, and it brings pain and struggle and hurt to people and keeps them sometimes physically bent over and unable to stand up, and other times more metaphorically struggling just to survive. So in all of the ways that systems can burden us, and when we're in the system saying, there's nothing I can do, right? Because sometimes we're on the other side of it, we can come to this story and see how Jesus interacts. First off, the woman comes in. Does she ask for help? She does not. Jesus says the system isn't working. He breaks the rules and brings some help to her so that she can be, and the word he uses is freed. You are freed from your ailment. You are freed. So she is now able to stand up and go and live in a new way because Jesus crosses across the systematic boundaries and frees her. He does it without her asking, and he brings that healing to her because he is the one that is paying attention and can do it. Now, if you think about the systems of our world, sometimes when we talk about Jesus, we talk in very personal relationship, right? Like, Jesus went to the cross to die for me and for my particular sins. But some of these systematic things are systematic sins. Did Jesus go to the cross for those as well? 100%, right? And even before he died, he was crossing boundaries and doing those things. So Jesus goes to the cross to encounter and deal with the systematic sin that we carry with us that brings people down and breaks people and keeps them burdened. But then when he comes to the resurrection, it's new. And so that gives Jesus new life, but that is the gift to us so that we can live in the systems, but not of the systems. We can live in these systems, but bring into them the heart and the compassion and the mercy that Jesus brings into the systems. He did not come, remember Jesus says this in another place, I did not come to abandon the law, but to do what with it? Fulfill it. Maybe what Jesus meant is that we're always going to have human systems, and what I came is to bring the compassion and the mercy and the love into those systems. And so in this case, Jesus crosses the boundary, breaks the rule to bring compassion and healing to this woman. And so what that means for us is that when we find ourselves maybe not simply frustrated by bureaucracy, I'm not sure Jesus cares how long we have to wait in line at the DMV, but when we find ourselves seriously burdened by systems, we can trust that Jesus shows up in those places. But how does Jesus often show up in those places? It's not magic, right? It's through people, the hearts of people that have compassion and mercy. One time I had traveling a lot. I had a very long week when I was an IT person, and I got to the airport and I sort of dragged myself up to the counter, and the ticket agent looked at me and did her little click, you know how they do that on the thing, and just keep going. And then she handed me my ticket and I looked at it, and it was a first class ticket. And I handed it back to her and said, "That's not my seat." And she said, "It looks like you've had a long week. That is your seat." Is that how our airline system works all the time? No, but this person stepped into that space and had compassion, and she was paying attention, right? That helps. And she saw someone who looked tired and exhausted and said, "Here's something that I can do that in that case, the system lets her do that, right? Here's something that I can do." When I got out of my extreme back pain, it was because I had a friend that was very persistent and said, "I think this will help you. I think this will help you. I think this will help you." Did I ask her for help? No. Did I ask the airplane person for help? No. But the help came through people. So part of what we can remember is that sometimes when we are feeling burdened by the system, that the kindness and mercy and gentleness and compassion of other people that we may just experience and say, "That was really nice." Maybe we should say, "God showed up today through that person, bringing some freedom into my life of the way that this system was leaning on me just now." But the flip side of it then is we are the body of Christ. And if we are the body of Christ, who is it that's going to take mercy and compassion and love into the systems of the world? We are. And so this story kind of tells us how to do that, right? Pay attention. See who shows up that's bent over and might need some help. And sometimes we might have to break the rules. We may have to figure out how to break the system so that we can bring that compassion and mercy to people. Now, sometimes that may be really hard to do. But if we are the people that are in the places where we can decide what a woman gets paid, and we choose to fight to make that happen, right? That's a little bit of change in a little bit of part of the world. And if we are the ones that examine our own complicity with racism and wrestle with our own prejudices so that we can act differently in the world and bring mercy and compassion when the system won't do it, that brings a little bit of transformation. And my prayer for us this day is that when the system is burdening us, we can trust that God is going to show up in ways that free us, because Jesus has already done that, but also that we can carry this challenge with us to be the hands and the feet, yes, but the heart and the compassion and the mercy of God that's going to change the world bit by bit till the whole of it is wrapped up in God's grace. Amen.